the lines today are getting much thinner between sales ops, marketing ops, partner ops, all of the other operations, because startups which are growing really fast, unlike large enterprises, they don't have these different divisions. Everything works as a one single unit. I have been in the sales operations, revenue operations for a little over a decade and a half, close to 17 years now.
Okay.
Work with different companies. Started my career with a small boutique consulting company, then moved on to Akamai, where I was responsible for the sales operations for their international division. So I was working with their head of sales ops, right? I was the business analyst then. Then within Akamai, also got an opportunity to work with marketing operations. And later on, when I moved, I think that's where the scope has been growing to more of revenue operations, because the lines today are getting much thinner between sales ops, marketing ops, partner ops, all of the other operations, because especially startups which are growing really fast, unlike large enterprises, they don't have these different divisions. It's like everything works as a one single unit. So I've had the good fortune of working in revenue operations, while it's not always been called RevOps because that's the buzzword that's catching up now. But yeah, I've kind of worked through those different ops categories for about 17 years. Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. So 17 years, you must have seen some real changes. I mean, sales ops and rev ops, that sort of role is only began to kind of get plaudits, in recent years. What's the change been like? What sort of change have you witnessed in the space?
Lots and lots of changes. I think from a time where the only system that we had to worry was a CRM system, and the CRM system only had that many capabilities that it could do within itself, to how the number of tools that a rep has today, like some of the tenured reps that I talked to today, right? They have tools like Outreach. They were not used to Outreach before. They were used to having these little tasks in Salesforce and going and sending out the emails, right? So, words like mail merge have disappeared today just because of the tools that are there. And even from an ops perspective, if you look at, how much we have, while some say that, hey, you know what, it's amazing that ops has changed so much because it's become so much more easier. But it's true that you have a lot more tools, but having a lot more tools has brought its own set of challenges, where it has that much more difficult to coordinate all of these as well. So the landscape has changed quite a bit, not just from a tools perspective, but if you look at techniques, if you look at how the SaaS industry has evolved over a period of time, right? At a point where it was one-time subscription, to how MRR became more popular, and today ARR is more popular, and we are moving beyond ARR to ACV, TCV, and so much more that's there, and then the customer value, which was calculated what was 10 years before, and in terms of how it is calculated today has significantly changed.
Interesting. So one point you mentioned there, you said you ran into the kind of the issues that come with tools. You have your own sort of problems with tools. So what could you elaborate on that? What sorts of issues have you run into with using different tools?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is data is available in so many different places, right? Previously, it was just Salesforce that was the single source of truth, so you could get everything from Salesforce, right? And all if you ever had to do was get it into a Excel spreadsheet, and then your analysis would either be there or here, right? And everybody was used to it. But today, within a single company itself, right, there are a few who are like, hey, I like more a centralized data management system, and we want to go with that, right? There are those who say that, oh, you know what, I have been using Excel forever, I'm only comfortable with Excel. And there are a few others, if you're using the G Suite, they're like, hey, I don't like Excel, I like only the G Sheets, because it's a lot more interactive and easy to work on, so give it to me on that. And then there are these new age tools, like we have Clarity or People.ai or Troops, right? Which bring so much data together. So I think just getting data and agree, for everyone to agree on a single source of truth, I think is a bigger challenge for a RevOps leader today. It's like, because somebody is saying, hey, I'm going to believe only what's there in Salesforce. Somebody is saying, oh, but for me, outreach is more critical, and for others, they're like, hey, I have either a Gong or a Chorus or anything else, right? So it's not easy.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools out there, and like, I think what you said, I echo what you say in terms of you need to find a single source of truth and stick to that. You know, you can't have several different ones. So yeah, that's great. If we go into the framework of questions now, as you mentioned, we're going to talk about forecasting today. So just let's start it off with, who does forecasting responsibility fall on, or who should it fall on rather?
That's a wonderful question. That's a question that I get asked every time I join a new company, or within the same company. Every 6 months, this question definitely pops up. And, what I've told my CEOs or the leadership on top is that when you look at it overall, I think at the starting point, forecasting is there are two people who should be made centrally responsible for forecasting. One is your either your sales ops leader or revenue ops leader, right? Why? Because sales forecasting has to follow a certain methodology, has to follow a certain process, and that entire methodology, definition, process is something that should be defined by sales operations, right? Easy to put all of the processes together. So that becomes the first person who is responsible for sales forecasting, and the second person who becomes responsible for sales forecasting is your head of sales, whether that's, you call them VP of sales, director of sales, head of worldwide sales, head of GTM, whatever that you right, different nomenclatures, or a CRO, right? It's that the head of that the sales motion becomes the second person, because if this person does not believe in a forecasting methodology and is not pushing that through, then I have seen that the adoption never comes through, because all of your second level and third level managers are always talking to your head of sales, and
yes,
if he or she is not pushing continuously, saying that, hey, why are you giving me a wrong forecast, why are you over forecasting, why are you under forecasting, and if forecasting is not taken seriously week over week and on a consistent basis, then I think it does not. So I think these two people become very responsible to get that process started. But I think once the process begins, sales forecasting is a responsibility of every single sales rep to sales manager. And why do I say this is because, think of this, if you have 50 sales reps, and let's say 6 sales managers, and you have one head of worldwide sales, if of the 55 sales reps do not forecast regularly, then the sales manager cannot give their forecast. If a sales manager is not able to, how does a sales director roll up a forecast, right? Then the entire science behind forecasting kind of breaks. So that's where it becomes a process where everyone has to take a responsibility as soon as the process has begun, is that, hey, every week at this day, this point, let's go give our forecast. And this is the way that we give the forecast, right? It doesn't change. It's like, hey, this is what is expected of me every single week at the same day. It's almost like I was telling some of the new joiners, is like, hey, you know what? While these processes look very difficult to you in the beginning because you're just getting used to it, think of it at some point in time, you did not know how to walk, but then walking has become a nature of you. You don't have to tell your legs, take me there. They just take you there because your mind is coordinating. And I think, we have put a time slot, a 15-minute time slot and every single sales rep's calendar, which is their forecasting 15 minutes. So we say that, hey, that get to this point consistently, it's already on your calendar, you're not going to miss it. So it kind of becomes a habit for everyone, which makes it that much more easier.
Interesting. Yeah, I really like that point about shared responsibility. I think that's super important. You have the ops side of things. These are people who know the data very well, the leadership who've been there, done it, and they're paid to make these decisions. And you have the reps that are in continuous kind of interactions with the prospects. So taking into account your experience, have you always worked at companies where there's a shared responsibility, or have you worked at some companies where it's just the sales leaders or it's just the ops people?
Yes, I think I've seen all of these variations over a period of time, right? There are variations where it's said that, hey, you know what, we are not going to have every single sales rep go and do some kind of a forecasting. Why? They manage their pipeline really well. Now you go and figure out the scientific way of how we can do forecasting, right? What is it that you can do with the data that's already available? Let's not build another parallel process for forecasting. So that's where ops becomes the whole and sole responsibility to go and do the number crunching and figure out a number which is the right forecasted number, right? That's one way of doing it. Which happens all the time. There are some managers who are extremely detail driven who say that, hey, I don't want any help from ops. Me and my reps, on a week to week basis, we ensure that these are the opportunities that we are forecasting. We don't need anybody's help. We will let you know, and how we will let you know. So some managers are the detail oriented, so they like to keep it that way. And in a lot of places, it's like, hey, the sales leadership says, I have a good understanding of overall how it works. I don't want every single person to come and give me a number. I can talk to just 3 of my sales directors and figure out that, hey, we are going to get to either 3 million or 4 million or 5 million or what the number is, because we've just talked about it and we have a good sense. And that comes with my experience. I can talk to my 3 directors and figure out, what my forecast is going to be. I don't need any kind of a scientific proof or anything to back me up. So yeah, all of these variations, but between all of these variations, I've always told one thing to everyone across the years is that if you don't make it a unified effort, right, from bottom up, the process is going to fail, because everything is going to be dependent either on one person or just a few people or one process, right? Which is, you can't have a single point of failure. So you need to look at different aspects to know for a fact that, hey, this is something that's going to get right. So that's where you ask your forecast from your sales reps, then your managers look at it and make corrections based on their experience that's there, and then you finally as a sales leader are able to go ahead and choose that number in terms of what the forecast is going to be. But at the same time, sales operations does not shy and go back. Sales operations is still going to do its bit, where it's going to look at a lot of different methodologies, whether that's weighted sales stage analysis, or whether it is op forecast category analysis, or there are so many more number crunching techniques that are out there which could be done. So I think you have to do all of these in parallel, because it takes all of these methods to finally get to a refined element, and it takes some time to get there before you know that, okay, this process is going to work for me and work well for me.
Interesting. So that goes on to my kind of second point in terms of what methods do you use. I know I've spoken to some people who use a kind of a best case and a commit, and then they can kind of say, right, these are ones that are really likely to come off, and the reps put that in. What do you kind of run with yourself, and what do you believe is the best sort of methods, or is it all different for each company?
I mean, a lot has happened, so maybe we can talk about the current methodology that we are following, right? Like I said, not a single methodology. So there is one which is an ops-driven number, right? Which we look at, and which is more around pipeline and what we believe is going to be the conversion from that pipeline, which is dependent on historical data. We know that, hey, enterprise deals close at a certain sales cycle. These are the factors which define whether an enterprise deal is a good deal or not deal. So there's a certain weightage that's given to those deals, whereas SMB deals are different. So there's a different weightage that's given. So that's more the ops number, which tells us that, hey, this is your goal, this is your forecast, this is your pipeline, this is the conversion, this is what we believe you will be able to get to. But at the same time, we also have a process, and all of this has been built just on Google Sheets, although it were a SaaS product on its own, is that every single sales reps, they have their own Google Sheet where they are responsible to go and provide one number only, right, every week, right, which says that, hey, this week, I believe that this is what I will close for the entire quarter. Remember, it's not a day, it's not a week. It's like, what do I believe I'm going to close for the entire quarter? And every week they give us that gut check. And what's amazing is that gut check moves up and down, which means that people are thinking about it, right? It's not like someone's just going and saying, hey, my quota is $100,000. I'm just going to go and continue to put the $100,000, right? It's like, there are folks who come and tell us that, hey, if I have a quota of 100,000, unfortunately, it's just going to be $25,000. We already know, and we are expecting that, from a rep, right? And there are reps who come and say, hey, I have a big swinger, and I know that I'm probably going to do a 250, and I'm very confident of it. So, they're giving us the better number. So we have rep level forecast, and finally, the senior management looks at all of these numbers, and they come up with the sales directors and the head of worldwide sales together they have their gut number that they look at and say, oh, wait, all of my reps together are saying we are going to get to $10 million. But I think realistically we are going to get to either $8.5 million, or wait, actually there are some of these deals which the reps are holding back and we know it's going to come. I think we're going to do a little over 10 million. We're going to do, let's say, $11 million, right? So that's that
Okay.
gut number. So we have checks at all of these points, and once the quarter ends, we check all these points together. We see, hey, sales up said this is what you will get to. Let's look at how close did they get to that forecast. Each rep said, let's look at how close did each rep get to, right? So we have a forecast accuracy score that we build, that we go right from a sales rep to a sales manager to the VP of sales and to sales operations. So everybody is given a score.
Okay.
Yeah, to say which is the better methodology, what failed, what did not fail. And I think over the last year, there's been so much learnings which has helped us go and improve some of our sales processes in this entire exercise of forecasting.
That's a great way of doing it. So is that a process that you've recently brought in that's been a success, or is that something that was there before you joined?
No. So the sales forecasting process, I think, was a single process before I joined here at Whatfix, and this is something that I have introduced overall as a system, which is a mix of the different methodologies. And I think these methodologies, some I have worked at some companies, some which I have helped implement, some I think is something that I have learned from my senior peers over the years, right? The sales directors, from different companies, the sales ops leaders that I have worked with over a period of time, based on how they have done it. So I think it's a approach which has taken its own time to get to where it is today.
Awesome. And how do you define what success looks like in forecasting?
I think success, nothing defines it best if you are in the 5% range, right? I think that's the best indicator, is if you say, hey, you know what, and that's the error rate that you're willing to give, because they are never going to be able to forecast to the cent. Everybody knows that. So, how much error percentage, and what we try and give ourselves is the 5% error percentages. If you are between that 5%, and still if you are then again in the 10%, it's not that you've done really bad. You've done a good job, because some deals which you are confident because of external factors, because of factors which are defined more from a customer's perspective, tend to slip. Some deals which you knew may not close, sometimes close at the end of the quarter, just because of the different schemes that you could run, or just because things changed at the customer level, or just because you were a little more persuasive and that persuasion helped out to close that deal. So there is always some slippage, something that comes front, something that goes ahead. So you give yourself that small percentage error. So I think that becomes critical for me. The second one that's critical for me from a success perspective is, in terms of what my other departments are saying, right? Especially customer success, is customer success coming to us and telling us that, hey, you know what, you're putting a lot of pressure on us because we are not able to handle the load of logos that are coming in, right? So many new customers coming in. It's great that people are believing, but you're not telling us, which means that we are not able to allocate that many customer success managers to do a good job with, customer onboarding and taking it forward. If that pressure is not there from customer success, I think it's a great story that we are doing a good job of telling our peers well ahead, and they are able to plan well ahead, right? So that becomes very critical as well. I think finance appreciates it too, more from a budgeting perspective, because if you've budgeted $1 million for variable pay, but if you're going to go a lot higher, finance always appreciates it if you can tell them a little ahead, so that the things are taken care of. It's not that there's a dearth of money, but finance always has this thing, is that, hey, if I'm going to park 1 million as expenses, I don't want to go beyond a certain range, right? That's something that finance tries to do as well. So I think that's a good indicator as well, to say that, hey, my forecasting is a success. So yeah, accurate forecast matters. And if things are going up and down for me and things are not consistent, I think that's a good sign too. Some of the leaders actually get worried because of that. They're like, hey, you know what? It's suddenly going up, suddenly going down. And what I try and tell them is that, hey, which means that everyone's doing it in a scientific way and not giving you a random number, which means that people are actively looking at their deals. When a deal is gone away, they're actually removing that deal from their forecast number. And if a deal is coming through, then they are putting it in their forecast number, which means that it's good that there is an oscillation over a period of time and it's not a dead straight line.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make there about one of the priorities as well is that it helps with revenue team alignment as a whole. We were just discussing at the start, kind of it's in startups, it's all as one, right? There needs to be that constant communication between all. So I think that's a great point. And then my last question would be, what's the key considerations for driving adoption of forecasting processes?
That's a good one. I think I have lived that for many years, but more so in these last 1 year, that a little over 1 year that I have done this at Whatfix. I think one of the most critical aspects to that is having a defined sales process. If everybody understands and lives and breathes a single sales process and a single sales definition, I think your forecasting becomes easy, right? And what that is how do you ensure that while new reps are joining, right? How do you tell them what each sales stage means, right? Hey, if there is a negotiation stage and a contract stage, what's the subtle differences between a negotiation stage and a contract stage, right? When does a deal move from negotiation to contract versus a demo versus a post demo or a post follow up? What are the factors that change? What are the different things that you would fill up in your CRM to ensure that these changes are well reflected? I think that definitely helps without a doubt, right? Pick up more than one forecasting methodology. That's something that I think I've said this. That's critical.
Yeah.
It helps you over a period of time. You realize that hey, it's easier when I have different things to fall back on, right? And it gives you a range as well, right? If you look at your senior leadership, they're not looking at you giving them a single number. They're like, hey, give me a ballpark range. Are you going to be 10 million or 10.3 million, right? It's okay for me. I don't mind the oscillation. So that's kind of that. Keep it consistent and keep it repeatable. I think this is very critical. And I have a sales ops manager who's dedicated to this exercise, right? Not just of all the responsibilities that he has. One of the responsibilities that he has is to ensure that by end of day Thursday, every single sales rep and sales manager have updated their forecasts. Right now, we've built an easy process over that. He's got his checks and balances. Wherever he sees somebody has missed out, he pings them, he talks to them. It gets updated. It was fun how when we were doing an ops session, and one of the we were talking to all of our salespeople, and one of them during the Q&A session said, one of the things we love is how Tarun always reminds us of what needs to be done from a forecast perspective. We may forget, he will never. So I think that consistency and repeatability, like I said, putting it on a calendar for all of the sales reps, it's become so consistent and repeatable that more than 95% of our reps, we don't really have to go and remind them. Like they know that this needs to be done and it needs to be done at this point in time. So I think that's critical from a success perspective, right? And last but not least, I think is two things actually, instead of last one. The first one is keep everyone accountable, right?
Yes.
It's very, very critical. If a sales rep is not doing their job, you need to tell them the criticalness of a forecast, right? Until and unless everybody understands and you're holding them accountable, if a sales leader is not doing a good job, you need to go and not shy back from telling them that, hey, you know what, this was required. Like if I was, as an ops leader, was not able to submit the sales forecast to my board because one of my sales director missed out, right? Because he or she decided to leave early on a Friday, and that I have to go and tell them that, hey, you know what? Only because of you, there were 100 other people who did it, but just because you missed out, this kind of broke the whole process. So it makes them, accountable. They're like, oh, it's not some random. It is something which is very critical to what we do from a sales perspective. So let's not miss out. So accountability, and kind of tied to that is my last point, is that celebrate when somebody does a good job of accurately forecasting, right? If you see that there are these 5 reps who always go, and this is something that I have seen in previous organizations, is that sales forecasting is done, but it's never celebrated like a closed won deal. And one of the things that we have changed over here is that if reps are consistently doing a good job of giving us a number and living to that number, which means that they are putting in a lot of effort. And I think if 5 reps are doing an amazing job compared to all the other 95 reps, I think it's a kudos to them that needs to be called out, right? And that kind of brings the accountability to everyone else as well. Is
100%.
that, hey, Yeah, it's not like it's a random exercise that's being done. It is a serious exercise. It is a
Yes.
metric that everybody is following. So I think celebrating a forecast accuracy is also very critical. Is like not just a sales rep, a sales director, the head of worldwide sales as well. Is when you're closing your numbers, you tell the board that, hey, this person as head of sales did a great job making the corrections, and here we are as a number, which I think is awesome. So that definitely helps.